Good day to you. Welcome to another episode of Fighting Men of Rhodesia on YouTube. My guest today is Martin Lunderstedt, a guy that I knew from many, many years ago. And Martin was a gunner in the artillery. So as I've expressed on other interviews with artillery guys, I really, really enjoy the stories from the artillery people. And mainly because a lot of the records of what was actually carried out by the Rhodesian artillery has never been recorded or it's just gone missing. So, Martin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
As we were chatting off scene, your name and you in particular engenders one of the oldest memories in my grey cells, and that is when you lived in Umtali, and my mom knew your family, and my dad used to play bowls up there at the club, and we got engaged with you kids. I think you had two older brothers, didn't you?
Stephen and David.
Stephen and David. So this is a 60-year-old memory. We decided to take you out into the golf course one day. You were just a little nipper, and we found a chongaloro. And for our foreign viewers, that's a millipede, and they stink like crazy, and they taste like terrible. But we broke off a piece, and we gave it to you to eat.
Well, at least you weren't bullies there.
No, you actually ate it. I was very impressed, man. You went up in my esteem there quite a lot. And then your grandmother, lovely sort of great-haired lady, sitting in a big chair there with the rain outside coming down this diamond pewter patterned window, and we were eating cake and drinking tea. So meeting you through Facebook is it's amazing how life goes around. You know, you're part of one of my oldest memories, but maybe not in the most tasteful way, excuse the pun. So without any more rubbish stories from me, tell us a bit about your life, where you were raised and how you ended up getting into artillery, Martin.
Well, what actually happened was we were, as you said, we were in Hillside Golf Course. We were living at a place called Longden House, and it was built by some guy called Red Buffalo, but that was back in about 1910. But the original property was by Kingsley Fairbridge. It was his gardens, and he had this little patch of land that eventually a house was built onto it. It was a really hodgepodge house, and it had been added on about 5 or 6 times. It was huge. It was probably about 5 or 6 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, etc., etc. But most of the house was blocked off. We never went there. But my granny and grandpa, they had the house. It was actually bought for them at one stage by my Uncle Wally. He was a builder there in Umtali with the other builders, Dick and Norman. There's a whole lot of them. All the families were there. So we were living there. My dad, that was Howard, and my mom, Betty. And they moved there. They were actually allegedly planning to emigrate. That would have been the time when the Congo had collapsed. And I was born then. And they were actually keen on going back down south. So what happened was they didn't. And my dad got a job at the railways as a builder engineer on the railway lines, building culverts and bridges, etc., etc. So we stayed, and then we moved into that house. And then Granny and Grandpa, they moved to Bulawayo, and they both perished there that year. I think that would have been, we moved there about 62, so 61, 62. So they died in 64. So we took over the house for a bit. Then from there, okay, I stayed in Umtali, obviously, Boys High, Charlie Boys, Chancellor, the Umtali Junior, and Umtali Boys High. But then at that stage, all of us were going to the army. We had no choice. It was it. And my armman was killed in 76, August 8th, there with Foxtrot Company 4RR. Him and 4 other guys were killed in a mortar raid. That was 8th of August. 3 days later, 11th of August, we had the first mortar raid on Umtali. And then, yeah. But to do with artillery, there was a gun position called Impala Arms, just south of us on the Wumba. And as schoolboys used to sneak off there and go to, they had shows on there, and we used to go to the shows. And we thought, well, this is artillery. This is brilliant. But they never told us that it was a TF bloody gun position. So the National Service and the regulars, if we went there, it was just to clean up and for like a few days before the TFs took over. So they had a pub and everything, but not when we were there. So anyway, so we all, a lot of us from Umtali actually went to artillery because of Impala Arms. And we ended up at Big Falls or Mount Selinda, Nyamampanda, all the other places but Umtali, because the TFs were there the whole time. So yeah, and I went into intake 160, January the 4th, 1978. So we were call them almost freshies by that stage. And I did my first phase. I was with the junior leaders or junior NCOs. That was C Company. I was 9 platoon C Company, and we were going to be the lance corporals, etc. for the in-depth companies.
That was the LT wing, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. Yeah, leader training wing.
Yeah.
So we were there. Basically, I went there because I was told not to volunteer for anything. That was first thing. You never volunteer. So we were a huge intake. We must have been about 1,200. And they came, I think it was the third or fourth day, all the different units. And they were asking for police, INTAF, guard force. And it was actually quite ironical because with the guard force, they asked for volunteers. And I think one guy volunteered and they needed 60.
Wow.
So they said, okay, fine. You from that guy, that man standing there to his right, you're all now guard force. And as I said, that the entire crowd ran to their left to hide in amongst the others. So the corporals had to go in and actually separate another big batch of guys and said, you are now guard force. And so that was where we were introduced to that. So we were, the rest of us, we decided we're not volunteering for anything. The police came, they took. So it was basically police, INTAF and guard force were taken. Then they looked for other guys. Do you want to be this? Do you want to be that? And we just sat fast, a number of us. We weren't going to go. And it ended up, we were actually sent to the OSB. I don't know how we ended up going to this. And we had to learn, and they were training us for the first 3 or 4 days. We all had these bloody bibs. And we were doing tests. And I was given a test of a river with 2 poles, a plank, and a drum and a rope. And I had to get that drum over the raging river where there were crocs. And funnily enough, even to this day, I still haven't found out anybody who can do it. So my name obviously was one of the first to be kicked off the OSB course, which it wasn't a surprise to me because I actually didn't even volunteer to go, and we just ended up on it. And all of us who failed that OSBs, we were put onto the LT wing. So we did that. We did our first phase, and it was actually quite pleasant. It rained almost the first 6 or 7 weeks. It rained and rained and rained in Bulawayo. And number 3 guard was always misty and rain and drizzle. But, it was okay. A lot of us were day scholars. So to fit into that military mode, unlike the boarders who actually knew exactly what was going on. I mean, you're showering with all these other guys and you'd never done this before. And suddenly you were there, you all shaved together, you shat together, you did everything together. And you ate together, you ran and ran and ran. And you were actually called a couple of nasty things by the corporals, etc. But that was their job. So anyway, at the end of first phase, we entered it was classical, second phase. Now they're training us. But this is why I joined artillery actually, was because of this. There were some guys who we used to go and all our stuff was laundered. We'd send our shirts and our trousers away to the laundry. Every day they come back clean. It wasn't like in the old days when you used to wash your own clothes and all that. This is now 1978, it's serious. And there were guys stealing. And we suspected it was the actual guys who were doing the laundry themselves. The guys who were in the same unit the same platoon as us. But we couldn't prove it. And anyway, I ended up with 1 shirt instead of 3. And we did complain to the corporal in charge, and I think our color sergeant was Boulevard, a Kiwi. And he used to call us all the time, his shower of blue shit and all that. He was a good color sergeant. The sergeant before him was Sergeant Hammond, redhead, liked to brawl. Sergeant, trooper, sergeant, he was a character. But anyway, so what happened is I had this 1 shirt left, and we did a crawling through the mud exercise, learning how to leopard crawl. But that night I was going to number 3 guard, so out to the ammo dump, and I only had this 1 shirt. Now it's completely covered in mud. So, but we had to go and get changed and come back. So what I did was I thought I'd be clever and put our combat jacket over it and button it up, and then put my webbing belt on the outside like you can do. But there must have been mud on the collar, which I didn't see. But the major saw it. I think it was Major. Geez, I can't remember his name now. Ron Marilia, Bronze Cross, RAR boy. Now he saw it, and he told me to open up my combat jacket, and of course my shirt is covered in mud. So he said to the sergeant, charge this man. So I thought, stuff this. We've complained about our stuff has been stolen. Now that this is the only shirt I got left, now I'm forced to go on this guard. So I thought, how do I get out of this? And the very next day, came back, I was told I was on orders, and I'd have my orders would be like that Thursday or something. This was on the Tuesday. And I heard some guys were going to sign on regular. And I thought, well, I don't want to go on orders. Now, you're talking to an 18-year-old now. This is his logic. If I sign on regular, I won't have orders. So I asked the guys where they're going. About 5 or 6 were going to Grey Scouts. There was one guy, Buckley Hunt. He was going to artillery. And that was it. There was just artillery and Grey Scouts. No RLI. And while we were waiting, so I thought, oh, stuff you, I'm going. It was impulsive. It was absolutely madness, but that was there. So then, while we were all sitting to go get on the train to go to Salisbury now to go and get signed on at the signing on office, old Sergeant Major Schuster walked past. He was our PTI boy, quite a handy German. What he did was he said, "Where are you guys going?" So we said, "No, we're going to sign on regular." He said, "Where?" Now we knew Schuster, so we all said RLI. So he was actually quite chuffed. He was like, "There you go, boys. You made the right choice and all that." But we just did it to make him happy. So anyway, we ended up going to Salisbury, and because I was under 21, I had to get my parents' permission. So my mom was my only guardian at the time, and she obviously didn't want me to sign on at all because her husband had just been killed two years prior to this. So she said no. So I said, "Look, Mom, here it is. I'm going to artillery. I'm not going to the RLI. So today, I'm already here to sign on. And even if you don't tell them, I'm going to tell them that you said yes." But I said to her, "I'm not going into the RLI." Mm-hmm. So she said, "Okay, then I'll give you my consent." She wasn't happy, so I went into artillery. But the fun part about it, they said artillery is, the clever guys go there because of Met and the weather and all that. They lied. There's a lot of guys from the special classes in there as well. But the majority of the guys, there were some. When I got there, we the two of us, Buck Hunt and myself. Buck lived in Cranbourne, so he stayed with his folks. So he was quite chuffed. And the day we got there, they said to us, "Well, here you are. You can go home for the weekend." And it was like, wow, this is great. We've signed on. We were given our berets, our staple belts, everything, but we hadn't done the gunnery course yet. So off we went. I went home to Charlie. Buck, of course, went home. We came back and we were so chuffed because I knew that Easter was coming up the next weekend. It was in March, 78. So Easter came, and it was the Thursday. Next day was Good Friday, and suddenly we were told, "Guys, infantry, the National Service Troop was called out to the Hondi Valley to go and help." I think it was 1RR at the time. So off we went. That was my Easter. God, all my plans. And while we were going to Hondi Valley, all my mates from Polytech and that were driving past, waving at me. Guys like Dave Charles, Peter Todd, who else? Dave York, Dave Howard or York. They all drove past and waving and blowing their hooters, and it was pissing with rain again. And we were in the back of the four-post. So we ended up going to Hondi Valley, and because we were brand new soldiers, we were freshies. We just come from Llewellyn. We were super fit for our standards anyway. And they said to us, "Well, guys, here you are. You got the MAGs. And so we were given to these guys, these National Service guys. And they were all about to clear out because of 155 and 156. So they're all finishing up now. And they weren't interested. So I just said, "Look, I'd never done the coin or anything like that. I'd come straight from I think it was 10 weeks or something stupid." So I said, "Well, look, what do I carry with me?" And they said, "You carry everything." I said, "What do you mean everything? I've got the G gun, They said, "No, you carry." So I said, "I've got 4 rat packs. He's going for a 4-day. No, you carry them." So there, 4 rat packs in their boxes went into this awful rucksack. change of clothing, huh? Change of clothing, extra socks, my second barrel, my 500 rounds plus 100 rounds, a mortar. I think it was a mortar. This 61, 61 mil. A claymore. Basically everything that we had. If I could hardly walk, and these other guys were carrying the FNs and they were light compared to, but not one guy offered to help, and I never forgot that, because years later when I was a stick leader, my G gunner, he carried nothing but his ammo. We carried all this stuff, and actually they were fools because they were national servicemen just doing. And I recall vividly going up the first pass, basically going that first one going into Hondi. It's an awful road, and we were going up a little escarpment, and we went past some black ladies, and the one shouted and shone at us, and the black soldiers with us were very, very angry and shouted back. And I said to them, "What did they say?" He said, "They just said we're all going to die tonight." So that was my introduction to my very first bush trip. Well, anyway, I'm still alive. So we had that first camp. We were OPing, and obviously we knew nothing. The guys knew nothing. I mean, we were probably compromised the very first second that we climbed off the trucks. They knew we were there. We ran out of water at one stage, but it started raining, and my bivvy was so loose that all the water gathered in my bivvy. I couldn't dare move, because if I did, it would burst and I'd be covered. And all the other guys filled up their water bottles for my bivvy. And, but I do recall one thing about that bloody trip, that specific 4-day trip, the pepper ticks. Lying with my binos watching this village, and the pepper ticks were dropping off the blades of grass onto my arms and all that. I have never seen so many in my life, even years later. And we got seriously bitten there. Then the rest of the trip was basically just patrolling, walking, dying of heat. It was very humid. It rained. We crossed rivers. We were totally compromised. We were just there as fodder. And looking back, I don't even know why we were there in the first place, because we were useless. That was my impression anyway. We shouldn't have been there. That was the National Service troop. There were some good guys there. So at the end of that 3 weeks, I was totally convinced I picked the wrong unit, because I've got these guys telling me what a arse I am, and you stupid, we're leaving, and you're an arse. You've got another 3 years of this waiting for you. So of course we get back to Salisbury now, back to Cranbourne, and the regular troopers there now. Now they've just come back from, I think they were at Villa Salazar, and on the way back they had a huge contact at Nyanyadzi, just south of Umtali. And they had fire force and everything. And I remember the one guy, Gunner Mervyn Bruce, he was shot in his buttocks. And he was the only guy injured in the whole thing. And it was, so I didn't see him until a couple of weeks into it. And it was, so then, sorry, I'm rambling about this, but this blonde guy came running up to me, and he was all kind of wild. And he said, "I believe you're a new regular." So I said, "Yeah," and I made a big mistake. Well, it turns out this was another regular. His nickname was Jola, or Coley Liebenberg. He ended up being one of my great mates. And he called me an arsehole, because I don't want to be a regular anymore, because the National Service. So we went there, we did our gunnery. We had a guy called Steve Flanagan. He was our sergeant in charge of us. He was a pommy, came out, wasn't a nice guy. And I believe he's still alive. Anyway, Steve, good luck wherever you are. You weren't too bad, but we didn't like you. And then there was a couple of others. Booba McCormack, fantastic guy. I think he was a sergeant or a staff sergeant at the time. He was a fantastic guy. Came down, joined the South African Defence Force, Marines, back to artillery, 14 field. But we did our gunnery, and there was a whole lot of guys. I think we had a very big intake. We had a guy, Kerry Taylor, and Charlie Boy. He came out. He signed on into artillery from scratch. So they sent him to RLI to do his basics, and they forgot about him. And he went into one commander, and he did a fire force with them, and he was quite chuffed. He had his green and white, and he thought he was now RLI and artillery. Anyway, they called him back, and so he was quite pissed about that. So we had our gunnery thing. We had Jeff Johnson, Miro Jackson, Guy Redmile, Rocky Rockhill. There were so many. Leon Broncos, Rob Cato, Henry Barry, Andre de Beer, Sydney Maguire. We had Steve Luca come and join us. We had so many. Clive Smith, sorry, not Clive Rice. Johnny Gerson, Dave Small. The list, it was quite a big. We had about 4 or 5 guns, and normally the intake was 4 per gun. But we had about 4 or 5 guns. We had an Afrikaans guy, Johnny Mayer. He came and joined us, told us he was from off Savannah. He wasn't part of our crew, and he went straight away into the regular troop. So I think the Rhodey Army, when the guy came around and said, "Here I am, I've done military service," they were chuffed. And you didn't redo anything. Most of them bullshitted as well. So we had a number of them. We had one specific little commie, a Cockney guy, Gordon Coates. He's probably dead now, but he was wanted for armed robbery in London, and he came out to Rhodesia. So he was away from Scotland Yard. They were very keen on meeting him again. And as long as Rhodesia stayed Rhodesia, he was safe. But he was a tiny little guy, about 5'1". Could hardly hear what he said. But that's really how it came into artillery, was by default, actually.
And did you enjoy the training?
The gunnery was fine. We stuck together, as a crowd, like all intakes do, and it wasn't a problem. There was sometimes there was stupid. The guys came, they all got drunk on their Friday night, and they asked us to do small arms inspection. So the guys would go down to the gunner's mess, because we weren't allowed in the gunner's mess before we became a gunner. We all had to drop our trousers, and the guy with the shortest penis, they tied a brick to it, and and then the guy with the longest one, they sort of bowed to him. What do they call it? Short arm inspection. So things like that. But once we got our colors for our staple belt and beret, once we passed it, we then went to the different units, and the majority of us actually went to the regular troop, and a few guys went to the national service troop, because national service troop was huge. They had all the 156, 155, 157, 158. All of 159 was actually with the regular troop. So we went, most of our guys went to 160, Johnny Gerson, Dave Small, those guys. But I think about 4 guys went across to the national service troop. A lot more 161s went. So
what was the reason for separating NS from regular? Was it just because of the accommodation you had at the various places, or what was it?
No, I think it was because they got a lot more guys signing on regular, and they didn't want to split it, so they kept it. You got guys who were, look, you get a regular soldier and a national service soldier. A national serviceman, the day he leaves is the day he's looking forward to. It's 91 days, 90 days, 89. Whereas the regular is supposed to be more professional. And you got some seriously bright national servicemen, and they were going to be made lance bombardiers or lance corporals. They were going to be. So they didn't want the regulars being shouted at by a national serviceman. So this is where I presume was actually the reasoning behind the national service troop and the regular troop, because we had some guys in the regular troop. They were never going to get lance corporal or lance bombardier status, and I probably ranked as one of them as well, because I remember when they eventually gave me a stripe, they gave everybody a stripe, because that stage we had 163 had come in, and it was the first intake with black soldiers, national service. So we got a number of them. They came through, and there were some pretty bright ones. And one of them was going to be made a lance bombardier, and there was no way they were going to allow a white regular gunner being commanded by a black lance bombardier. So the rest of us all given rank immediately by default.
Yeah.
They will deny it, of course.
And then you did get the boffins, as one of my recent interviews, Neville Wiley, you know.
Yes.
He said the boffins were the guys that ended up in the plotting board in the van there.
The Met department.
the guys who could work out all the algorithms and that sort of stuff. In fact, the Sword of Honor at my Osby course, crumbs, my memory's terrible. He ended up in the artillery, and he was very bright. You know, you could just see that formula and things were coming out of his air holes all the time. So I guess the more intelligent guys went up into the plotting area. Did they? Is that how it worked?
Immediately. There was guys, geez, who was it? Brian Hingley, or Benjley, as we used to call him. So there was so many. Andre Niemann, Buck Hunt went there almost immediately. He was seriously bright. They were actually sent down to South Africa to Potch to do a 3-month course with where there's, you know, the Met. The rest of us Dumbos, we just did driver's course, OP course, you know, just the normal, and learned how to fire a gun again.
And what position did you get on the gun? 1, 2, 3, 4?
Well, I was a number 3 at one stage. I preferred being a number 2. Number 2 is the guy who puts the projectile in. And yeah, I did a very, very bad ram. Bad ram is when you push it in skew on 5.5s. Remember, Rhodesia had 8 5.5s, and they were secret weapons, the 140 mils. They were loaned by South Africa. I think we only used them twice ever. Op Miracle, they were used as the backup. And I did a bad ram at Katanga range, and we had to shout out bad ram. And the guys they used to have these big towers where they're doing OPing and to see where the thing landed. So we shouted out, and they raided through. There's a bad ram, it's coming. And apparently it was so far off, like about 3 kilometers off where it should have landed, because it just goes everywhere. Instead of going in a straight line, it just goes in this huge circle and gets a bit wider and wider as it goes. So
I don't understand. How can you have a skew round when you got a barrel and something going into that can't jiggle around? How do you get a skew round?
Well, the 25 pounders was easy because they were 88 mil. So we used to use a pick shaft, you know, the wooden rod. But the 5.5s is a 140 mil, and you used to use the same damn thing. And that one, I put it in skew at the bottom, so the more weight was put on the one side, so it went in skew. But that was the last time I ever did that. After that, we were very careful. But in the end, I was the number 1. I was a quartermaster at one stage. Loved it because you're never at base. You're always out collecting mail for the guys, or you know. But I was the number 1 for the Forest Stadium, and so I've got one of the very first in the Jongwe medals. I think mine's number 1397. But we had to do the 21 gun salute for Robert McGabe.
Oh, and, that was at Forest Stadium.
Yes.
Yeah, I was there. I was attached to Mrs. Gandhi that night. I was in there. I saw the gun salute, and I was right there, just at the back of Prince Charles and all that lot there.
Well, we were right next to Bob Marley, and here's the thing: he was taking photographs of us, and we weren't taking photographs of him. Well, we couldn't actually, but we were pissed. All of us were absolutely wasted because we'd had a Goodbye Rhodesia party before we went there. But there's a few things that I distinctly remember was the crowd trying to push the fences down to get in. They were tear gassed. Yeah. The tear gas came over us. We weren't allowed to move. We had to stand to attention. Secondly, the guy next to me, Duncan McFarlane, he was a Lance bomb, just the same as me. His gun had a misfire. And I heard it immediately, and I shouted to my guys, fire. A misfire just doesn't go off. So if ever you hear the rounds going off, I think it was number 15 would have been his one, and there's a gap. There's supposed to be like a 10-second gap between each one, and it didn't go off, and that was the misfire. And the third major memory is the Canberra going over us.
Yes.
And the howling, I never forgot. It had the most incredible noise. I'd never heard that noise before. And funnily enough, years later, I read that the pilot actually opened the bomb doors just to and the freedom fighters in the crowd hit the ground because they knew that sound.
I'll testify.
And we didn't know what it was.
I'll testify to that. I looked up at the sky and thought, what the heck are they having an air display at night? You know, and you can't see the darn plane. And that whistling thing came over, and our local yokels were jumping from, some of them almost from the top of the stands on the opposite side of the stadium, and running under, to get some shelter. They were obviously tours that knew all about, that type of thing. It was so funny.
Wasn't it great?
Yeah, it was brilliant. They were really shitting themselves. Yeah.
So, it was funny. I never forgot that sound. But it goes into your subconscious memory. And then when I read about this, the guy was talking about Rufara Stadium, and he said, and the pilot had a last practical joke, and he opened the bomb doors, and all the ex-tours, freedom fighters, whatever, all hit the ground, and everybody around them was just staring at them, saying, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah.
They knew exactly what was happening.
There was a lot of twitching and twittering when the artillery guns went off as well. It was so funny, man. Jeez.
But it was awful. I mean, that was probably the worst night of our lives at that time, because we knew it was all over. We were still, majority of us were believing General Wars, because we were all called in that day and told he will never get in. Mugabe will never get in. It will be Muzarewa, and they'll get majority, and then we're going to get Nkoma, and Smith will join, and that's it. And we were also part of op courts as well. We were going around with the 5.5s, and when Mugabe took it, the Soka took back the 5.5s, and then we were driving around with our 25-pounders. We didn't know. We were told at the time that we were going to show the white population the Rhodesian army has not left them, and that was why we were driving around. We had people filming us. The RBC was filming us all the time. And we didn't know at the time, nobody told us, that we were actually preparing to wipe out, obviously, Mount Pleasant, the university. And every time we stopped, we were given our coordinates, where to aim. And to us, it was all a big joke, and we were just standing there ready. But we didn't know that if something had happened, we were going to fire. We didn't know that at all. And then I think that Saturday, when it was all over, we were going down Jamison, and Orali, I can't remember which commander it was, probably support. They stopped the traffic, and they did their last parade down Jamison, an impromptu parade. And I remember that because all of us trucks were following them, and all in a long convoy. And that was the last time Orali did a parade through Salisbury. I think that would have been about,
It was a very, very emotional night, very emotional. And the troops were all over Salisbury that day. At the corner of Jamison Avenue and some other place, there was a gun there. I remember there. In fact, Rob Riddell's given me the original photograph taken of the university, with all the targets marked on it, when they were going to attack the SAS. And your guns sort of supported that, I guess. But they were never there all the time. It was just false. I don't know. I think I'm correct in saying that.
But, no, you're not lying. Believe me. I think Charlie 10 had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, something went wrong there. There was rats that, I don't know what happened, but it just stopped. It was really weird.
Well, it's amazing how many people got medals after the war. We'll leave it there.
Yeah. Anyway, what was your first operational deployment, Martin? Where did you go to once you were all gunned up?
Well, while we were still busy with training troop, we were sent to Mount Cylinder. The Freddies were doing the that cordon, the minefield.
Cordon sanitaire.
That's it. So there was already a troop there, regular troop was there with their 4 guns. So what they decided, they needed a bit more. So they sent two extra guns with us, with the entire 160. We still probably had about 2-3 weeks left of gunnery. And they said, we're going to Mount Cylinder. So we went there. We went to where Mount Cylinder is, a place called Zona Tea Estate, on the top of it. And we were looking at Spongabera, and we could see what had happened. And the guy said, look, Freddie's seriously stonking the engineers and all that every day. So we were busy. We put our guns up, the extra 2 guns. We dug our shell scrapes, and note the word shell scrape. We were supposed to dig trenches, and the ground was excessively hard. And then the first afternoon, Freddie opened up the 122s on us. And that scream of those rockets was something else because it's landing on you. And it's a kilometer away. So hit the dam at the bottom, and there was a huge plume of spray. One went over us, probably about 200-300 meters above us. So they were getting us bracketed quite nicely. And then there was a couple of 75 recoillesses as well shot. And they actually, into 2 rounds, landed in the gun position, but their fuses were set wrong. So they went about 1 foot to 2 feet under the ground and then exploded. So instead of having shrapnel flying everywhere, we just had these rocks flying up in the air and landing on us. But we were all diving all over the place and there was 4 of us in this shell scrape, and I was the top guy. I was way above, and okay, obviously the next day the trenches were full. I mean, we were then chin height. But here's the thing, and it would have been a Saturday because they were having Top of the Pops or the Rhodesian hits or whatever. And the song by the Bee Gees, Staying Alive, was playing while they actually were hitting us with it. And I remember the one guy saying, listen to that song. And we all started laughing in the middle of this bombardment. And then Les George and myself, we were sitting there, and then somebody shouted, stand to. So we ran to the guns, and we were actually shattered. We were told, get back to your trenches. Somebody gave the wrong command to stand fast, not stand to. So we ran to the guns, and he dived underneath the diesel bows, and he got shat on again because of where he was lying. But while this was all happening, they had us totally bracketed, and the next rockets were actually going to wipe us out. We knew it. And then the quartermaster, the nutshell, came back from Mtali or Chipinga, wherever he was, and he was driving through in the 445. I think it was AJ Hollis and Paul Robbins. I think they were the two, and they switched the rockets onto them. So they missed. They completely took away the bracketing from us. They tried to hit the truck coming back. So this truck was zigzagging all over the tier state with round balls, rockets, shooting all around them. Eventually they got back. And so while we were all busy still praying and all that, we heard this incredible noise, and we thought it was the stolen organs. And as we were about to climb deep into our trenches, one of our hunters banked over us and gave us a victory roll. So that was at the war. It was brilliant. And then to us, the war was over. So we all climbed on top of the 4.5s on those roll bars, and we were watching the hunters come in from our side. And I never forgot that orange flame that goes from underneath the hunter's wings, and it just shoots off and it hits the Freddy's Ridge, and they just saw this red earth just erupt. And while they were doing it, they were shooting akak at them as well. You could see the puffs, and then the hunter would do the vertical dive and then come over us and basically just do a little twirl, and off he goes again. And then we were told we were told stand fast. So we went back to our guns, and we were supposed to fire smoke, but somehow the fuses were set wrong, and the smoke actually exploded about halfway to the target because the Canberras were coming in, and they were going to wipe the Spungabera out. But because the smoke wasn't good enough, they said no, rather leave it. And that was our first gun trip. And by the way, it was our best. We never had another one like that again. So
yeah,
we thought
those rockets are pretty frightening. I mean, I didn't experience that, but I've interviewed a lot of guys. Some guys in Angola had the stuff raining down around them like leaves, and just the noise, and it just sucks everything out of your lungs. It must have been terrible, very frightening.
That screaming of those fins going over you, and you think it's going to hit you, but it was something else. But as I said, that was the last time we ever got nailed by rockets, ever. That was in May '78. So yeah, after that we were always around Nyamapanda. We went there, Kotwa, where we were there for Kotwa. That famous picture of the 2 commando guys giving the brown eye to the Hercules. We were there. We were filming them. We had the 5.5s with us that day. So that was also a very interesting one because we were going to wipe our Kotwa. I think it was X-ray, assembly point X-ray.
All right.
And they'd done a huge booby trap for the engineers. And the engineers had gone there, they'd seen the booby trap, seen what was going to happen, and came back and said, that's it. So we were all doing a huge classical war exercise there was support commander, there was 2 commander, there was us, there was, I think, 2 troops of Elands. There was 106s from, I lie now if I say 8RR, but there was also a troop of TF 25 pounders artillery. There was our guys we had the 355s, because with that there's 10 per gun, whereas with the 25 pounders there's 6. So we had the 55s there, and so we all went to Kotwa. We felt sorry for the drivers because we had a big piss up that night because it was the end of the class thing, and they called us all at the camp it would have been about 9-10 o'clock, and the guys have been pissing it up seriously because we were going back to Salisbury the next day. And they said, all drivers come now to the command post. So all the drivers went, we carried on drinking. And then they said, we're going now. Pack your stuff, climb on the trucks, we are leaving. Load the truck, So we all went, the trucks climbed on and off we went, but we slept because we'd all been pissing it up. We didn't know where we were going. We just climbed on the trucks. And there was a hell of a lot of guys who'd snivelled off earlier, and they were in their bivvies and who were left behind. So they didn't know. And eventually, we had a guy, old second loot, old Nash Weber, John Nash Weber, sadly he's passed away, a good boy there, second loot. And he turned up later on in the day, and we said, how the hell did you find us? And he said, no, it was all the broken down Elands on the way. Just carried on fighting. we weren't friends with the armor car, by the way. So. And so we got to Kotwa, we did the guns, we had them ready, and then 2 deck loads of scouts turned up. And I remember a couple of the boys from Umtali, they came, very tall guys. I won't mention their names because one of them still happens them, tall with long beards. And they came and spoke to us because Umtali guys always seem to stick together. And they came and said, what are these things? I said, no, that's our 1944 secret weapon, the 140s, the 55s. And the guys are so serious with this. Then we had the support commander was there. They had mortars. 2 commanders, definitely. One of their troops was there. I don't recall which troop it was. And while this was all happening, a Hercules landed, and it was the monitoring force. And he parked his bloody Hercules right in the middle of the runway. And I remember the deck pilot running across to him, and they had a bit of an argument because he said, "You get that thing off now, because if the shit hits the fan, we have to take off, and you are deliberately hindering us by parking there." So anyway, they moved, and then the Hercules took off. Before it took off, a Puma with that white cross flew over, and apparently it was Walls and Rex Nonga and all those guys. And they actually took the Puma over our little site to show the amount of troops that were there to take out X-ray. And so, of course, they got there. I don't know if they landed or whatever. I can't recall it now. But they actually advised the freedom fighters that they had to take down their weapons and take down their booby trap because they were going to get done and removed. So they allegedly they did, but as we know, they were all Majibas anyway. Yeah. And the Hercules took off, and as it was taking off, the 2 commander boys all dropped their rods and gave him a brown eye. Now, the best part was as the Flossie was going up, the back door opened, and there was a lone little white bum standing in the back of the Hercules, giving us a brown eye back. And it was so good. It was, that was it. The RLI boys were so chuffed that the guy actually had the balls to do something like that. Yeah. That's just standing in the middle. But we closed up, we load. But it was the biggest convoy ever that Rhodesian army had done. And we just drove. And the MPs came, to the northern suburbs of Salisbury and closed off the roads so that trucks could go past. And it would have been about 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night when we drove through Salisbury. And I never forgot the amount of people standing, the whites, watching us and realizing how big our actual army was, even though we were so small. There were so many troops on that one. It was huge. It was the biggest convoy ever. I don't know how long it was. Probably 15, 16 kilometers long. It was huge.
Wow. Very interesting. That I love these type of statistics and impressions that you get. You can't read about this. This is why I love this series so much. Wow. So Kotwa, that camp, there were many. In fact, I think only one was ever actually attacked when they refused to move, and 200 were wiped out by the Air Force. I'm trying to get a guy to talk on that, but he keeps dodging the invite. So what happened after that, Martin?
After Kotwa,
Yeah.
basically, that was it.
Did you
That
ever
was
go?
it.
Did you ever go to Villa Salazar or Vic Falls?
Vic Falls, we spent almost a year there, but over a period of time. I know you were one in depth there,
One
but
for in depth, yeah. So did you? I think on your messenger synopsis or one of the things you've written to me, were you there when that attempted invasion happened in '79?
two guns went off. That would have been April.
Mm-hmm. Something
Two
like
guns went off. And I
yeah.
remember there's a guy, George Rodriguez. He was part of that. They went off and they actually had fun. They were fine. The rest of us stayed behind. We were there at Sprayview.
Yeah.
Our position was at Sprayview. So we had every day the flight of angels would come over us, take off. But I remember Armour was there. They were Grey Scouts was there. Grey Scouts had a camp there at the Sprayview.
Mm.
Armour, we didn't really see much of them, but I think they were more Nyamapanda way. But two of our guns went. I think Mike Hayes went to them. I stand corrected.
Mm.
He was the gunnery sergeant because Ray Beamish had just had his ears perforated by. He walked next to a gun as it went off. He was our gunnery sergeant at the time, and then he was sent back to Salisbury, and then Mike Hayes took over from that point on. That we were then Bravo troop. The regular troop and National Service troop stopped when 159 left, and they amalgamated the two troops because then it was just a lot of guys had left. 151, 150, 152 were all finishing up their 3 years and they were leaving. So the regulars were getting lesser and less. So they amalgamated the National Service and the regular to Alpha and Bravo. And we regulars basically became Bravo, but they split us completely. A lot of guys went there, but then they made the regulars the number ones instead of having National Servicemen as number ones on the Alpha troop. And
Were you there that night when Zipra tried to cross at Vic Falls? Were you actually involved in that engagement?
no, I was not. I was at Sprayview. We were waiting, but the two guns went off, and they were doing the roving, going, landing, firing off a few rounds, going back, firing off a few. But
Yeah.
they came back, and they were so chuffed, and we were so pissed off.
Yeah. Where did they go off to? I'm not quite sure what you mean there. That they went off. Where did they go?
On the Nyamapanda Road.
Okay.
They were actually on the Nyamapanda Road, firing at the dinghies coming over. There were two guns.
Nyamapanda, you mean Kazangula Road?
Kazangula, sorry, I'm
Yeah, you're on the wrong side of the country. That's okay.
Totally. No, it was the Kaz Road, yes.
Kaz Road.
Because our original gun position was 2Ks on the Kaz Road, off on the left there, National Park. I've been back there since, and there's still holes from our bunkers, but we took that gun position down, I think in October 78, and then we went back again in February, March 79 for the elections for Muzarewa. So we were there for that. I know the SAS boys were there with the 106s guarding the bridge because they were going to come over with tanks and all that stuff. And that's why we were sent there.
Yeah, I've done quite a long talk and a lot of interviewing and private conversations with other guys. I've got a very good overall picture of what happened there. But I'm surprised that the guns which you were involved at Sprayview didn't fire, because I was at the Elephant Hills ruins down below the escarpment. It had a beautiful view of the river crossing. I watched the whole thing, and I could hear artillery firing off behind me on the escarpment. I always thought that those were the guns stationed at Sprayview airstrip, but you telling me it was guns that were mobile down the Kazangula Road that fired.
I'm actually not quite certain anymore of that one. Because we did fire a few times. But I remember they did split up.
When you could hear the rounds going, and when I went back to where the flashing on the hill was going on behind me, that was definitely at Sprayview. So, but it's hard to tell, and it's not really that important.
We
But
probably did, and that's probably where Ray got hurt when
yeah,
he fired.
yeah, I'm pretty sure they fired at Kazangula at Sprayview, and it was spectacular to watch. I mean, there were air bursts, there were strikes going on in Zambia, and to watch those dinghies just sort of dissolve, it must have been terrible for the occupants of those dinghies, because they had an armored car shooting at them. They had a couple of infantry guys, and then as the dinghies went down the river, they got all the uh, Grey Scouts lined the bank and shot the hell out of them as well. And there were a
Yes,
lot of them right down.
and flat dog.
Sorry?
And flat dog. And the flat dog.
Well, yeah, the guys that managed to turn left and didn't go down the river, they ended up in the minefield. And
Correct.
So they were going boom, boom, bang in there.
Yes, that's right.
The ones that got through were chased down by Grey Scouts, and they got 10 of them. But the next morning we went to the jetty where they'd actually where the guys went down the river, our guys on a tourist boat to go and pick up the survivors. There were a lot of them on the islands, and I went on the booth cruise later that day as the forward fire control guy for my mortars, and yeah, one of the tourist ladies, it's amazing how quickly normality recovers. One of the ladies said, "Oh, look, hippo." And it was a big puffy guy floating on the bank there. But yeah, no, the 106s that were there were not SAS. They were my 106s. We had artillery. We had about 20 armored cars in the village. We had an entire troop of Grey Scouts. We had a full company of 9RR. There were all sorts of critters there with weapons. There must have been about a battalion in defence that night, but it was a very frustrating moment for me because I couldn't get through to our radio network to ask permission to open fire with my mortars, which was still 200, 300, 400 meters within range of where they were departing from the far bank. And I didn't want to fire without permission in case there were special forces around there and we landed something on their heads. I don't know. But it was very frustrating to have my mortars and watching all of this. And, for 45 years, I've been kicking myself that we couldn't engage, but it was a spectacular evening.
Well, at least you could see it.
Yeah, it was absolutely awesome. I wish I'd
we never knew what happened ever. We were never told about what the results of our guns. Mm. It was always a need to know, and I know you got a few guys but I think artillery was actually not utilized correctly. Mm. Is when RLI and SAS and those guys did the Jumbo Fire Force. We were sometimes used in the Fire Force, the Mukumbura specifically. We would actually go down there, and then the guys would OP and see, okay, there's a crowd coming through, and then they call in the guns, and it was highly successful. But why we weren't always used for that kind of thing, I don't know. Why weren't we sent to Centenary and used there, Hondi Valley with the guns? I think the TFs went to Hondi Valley once. They got called in there. But places, Nyamaropo, they're south of Chimanimani, that one. There were some certain places that deserved to be stomped, and they were never done. Mm-hmm. I still don't know why. Maybe there was people who actually knew that the places were liberated and they were going to leave it as liberated. But I believe that we were underutilized totally. Mm. I mean, we were at Vic Falls. We were basically, as I said, probably about a year there, but period of time, 2 months. Karibu, we only went once. Sure. In Yamampanda, we went twice, 3 times. Sipalilo, we were used as a fire force thing. Ray Beamish's boot had been killed just prior to that, and it was actually quite a sad affair because he was told it was his dad that was killed. And I remember taking him we were actually at Sprayview, and I took him. I remember driving with him to Vic Falls, to the airport, and he climbed on the what was it? That would have been the Viscount or the 720. I can't remember. And he landed in Salisbury, and there was his father to greet him, and he'd just been told it was his dad that was dead. So the comms from that was actually quite horrific. It was his brother had been killed in an ambush there in Sipalila. And so we went there to Sipalila. We were given permission to go with the guns. I remember Mike Hayes and then went as the OPs, him, Kerry Taylor, etc. And we opened up a few times there on unsuspected tours. So yeah, and that was they actually captured about 20 Majibas who were following us. We had a landmine incident right in the beginning as we were going. The bookie was in front and missed the mine. It was planted in between two roots of a tree, and he actually lifted up his sensor so he could get over those roots. The roots part of the road, and they put the mine right in the middle there in the roots. So one of our 4.5s, or we called them 7.5s because they were a bit stronger because they could take the weight of the hammer. He detonated. I remember hearing the bloody dead going off. I went, "Oh God, here we go! It's a bloody cake." And then we all went there. We all stopped. We took the ammo off the truck, took the gun off the truck. Off it went again. And the guys went on ahead. There was a RAR contingent with us, about 20, 30 of them. They went on ahead and they found an ambush position, and they counted 51 posies where the guys were waiting in an L shape, and all the landmine actually was stopped that ambush, and if it would have been quite disastrous. They didn't. I don't believe that they knew it was an artillery coming through. I think they just thought it was just, in chaff or somebody. But when they saw the guns, they ducked. But they caught a lot of Majibas who were following them, and then they took them, and then there was a bit of questioning, and then the CID got involved and took them back to Sipalila proper, or Mvukis, I can't remember, to get more info. And apparently the one guy was there when Ray's Boot was dead. So he was, Ray was killed. Was it Kokwi, where those former Rovano or the auxiliaries refused to lay down their weapons. And he was shot quite badly. He was shot in the lungs. So
terrible waste. You mentioned that you went to Kariba. Did you have any engagements from up on the hill there where you guys were based?
No, not at all. This was after the war was over. It was the only time we went there. And we went there as a basically just to give the troops something to do. So I remember us going, and we got to Karoi, and I had a 166. I had a driver for 166. The entire 166 was black. The entire intake was black. It was a bit hard because they all spoke Shona or Ndebele to each other, and of course none of us understood, which was actually quite stupid, really.
Yeah.
And I had this driver. I was given this crew. They were it was actually not a great crew. I remember one guy's name was Babongwe, and he was always in detention barracks. But if you spoke decently to him, he was fair. And I just said to him, just don't stuff me around. I won't stuff you around. I've got basically then I knew my time was up. 30 days to go. Just finish it and just get the hell out. And we were driving Karoi, and I think it was a bit misty. And the rest of the guns, we were a bit late. So all the guns were parked on the side of the road. So I told him, look, pull over. And he did, but he didn't brake. And we carried on driving. We drove straight into the gun in front of us. And I've still got pictures of the gun barrel stuck through the 4.5, where myself and this other guy, we were in the passenger side. And we bailed. As he was driving into the gun, we were already rolling on the ground. So the truck had to stay. That gun that we drove into had to go back to Salisbury because now it's calibration. Everything is gone. And we spent him and I, the driver and myself, spent the night in Karoi. Now, you never leave a soldier by himself to look, especially a junior NCO. So I found the Karoi, the Twin Rivers, and I sat there the rest of the day. And I got a bit out of hand. And I think there were some generals from the Zipra were there, or Zonla, and I actually insulted them, and we went back to Army HQ, and I was in a bit of trouble. And and then we went back to Kariba the next day with the new gun, new vehicle. The Tufis came and gave us the new stuff. And for my for my sins, I was made guard commander that night in Kariba when everybody else went on liberty. And that was it.
Now, I assume that was after independence, early 1980s sometime.
Yeah, it was just before independence.
Right.
And it was, yeah, because if independence was April the 18th, we all finished up on April the 30th, 12 days later. So by that stage, we just had enough. I remember Buck Bolter and Boo Boo McCormick, they left just before us. They came down to South Africa to join the 14 Field Regiment. And yeah, so that would have been about March, late March. And so in the end, it looks a couple of afterwards, they used to go to Kariba quite often, I believe, because there was nothing to do anymore.
Yeah.
And the intakes, those two intakes, 168 and I think 167 and 168, those poor guys, they had to finish their national servicemen, and they basically went in January and I think February, March, and they had to finish their national service unless they were going to varsity. So they stayed on in artillery. And I remember Charlie Boy, our guy Atwell, he got killed, I think May, June in 1980. They rolled a 2-5, and he was unfortunately killed after the war. But he was still doing his national service for the Rhodesian army. Go figure.
What a waste, eh? Now, I don't know if I got this wrong, but you were involved in something to do with the Viscounts and the Viscount tests or something?
Yeah, we did both the Viscounts. The first one was the big one. The second one was the first one was in September 78. The second one was in February 79. The second one was a joke. The grass was 10 foot high. I got bad tick fever. We saw nothing. It was awful. But the first one was actually the Viscount, the first Viscount where the guys were massacred. 10 guys were killed.
So explain that to me in a bit more detail when you say you couldn't see anything. I assume you were there as infantry, as artillery guys often did. Could you go through it in a little bit more detail?
The second one, because of our success in the first Viscount, they called us back again, because when they got told the second one went down, they said, okay, these guys they did pretty well the first time. Let's send them in. But remember, the first time was in September, end of the dry season. You could see for miles. This time it had been some serious rain. And all we did was just walk through grass, more grass, uphill, downhill, rivers. And it wasn't pleasant at all. And that's why we envied R a lot. They just drove it in.
You were looking for the gang that had shot the planes down.
Yeah, we were living on hope, obviously. As soon as that thing got shot down, they were gone.
And so what happened on the first one where you say you had a bit more success?
I think, I'm going to have to start from the beginning. I still stand corrected on this. I believe we were at Katanga Range, and we were called back. So if the Viscount went down on the 3rd of September, the 4th or the 5th, we were called back. And we didn't even know about it because we've been out of radio and everything. Nobody knew about it. So we were called in, and we went straight away. Sergeant Major McIntosh, the TF Sergeant Major, he's just passed away recently. He called us into our lecture hall, and we didn't know what was going on. We thought we were back in Salisbury, go to clubbies and Barney's and all those places and Cocktail. But they said, okay, a civilian aircraft of Viscount was shot down 2 days ago or yesterday. And we were actually horrified. We didn't know. None of us knew. The whole troop, no, not one person knew that. We were still regular troop then. So they said to us, okay, he said, but that's not all. There were 18 survivors, and 10 of them were massacred. They were wounded, they were lying on the ground, and they were killed. And he still said to us, and I never forgot it, because by that stage we were ready. We would just want to go and kill. And he says, there will be no more prisoners. Those days are gone. They've just shown us exactly what they do to our wounded. You don't take prisoners. I don't think he needed to tell us that, because I think even the whole Rhodesian army changed that day.
No.
So we were confined to barracks. I do know a few guys sneaked out and they went to visit their wives and girlfriends, but early the next morning we were off. And we got to just before the Elephant's Walk. There was a farmhouse on your left, probably about 2-3 Ks And we got there, and one RR was there. There was a certain captain. I don't even know his name. I can't remember his name, but anyway, he welcomed us. Oh, half the troops split up. The half was with us, and the other half went on the Sulu Scout bus, that pseudo bus. They went patrolling somewhere to try and catch the tours stopping the buses. So they were on that. So it was only half a troop. So when we went, we were introduced. This is it, and you guys are artillery. Basically, we were just cannon fodder, if that's the word. And he said, for every tour you get, I will personally buy you a crate of beer, because we weren't going to do anything. You know what I mean? This is artillery. They're gunners. So we spent the night. We were there. We camoed up. Then we went to Urungwe proper. We stopped that night at the police camp, and I think the special branch guy, Steve Knott, I mentioned him earlier, he was there then. And the guys made us at home, and they said 3 o'clock we're getting up. And so it was all just fairly basic. Lie down, go to sleep, and basically we just gone to sleep and you're awake already. And we climbed on the trucks, and they said to us, there's a group of Patu. They've been stuck on a hill, and zipper all around them, and they basically have run out of ammo. They've got very little ammo left, and any moment now they might be overrun by the tours. So we went out there, and I remember driving down this one valley, and I've never ever felt that my guts were screaming. There was something wrong in that valley. My hair was actually. I kept saying to all the other guys, there's something very wrong here. Just be awake, because I believe I had a dream about this valley when I was a schoolboy, and I remember seeing bad things at the end. Well, nothing happened. So, but that valley was exactly as I remembered it, and 2 years prior to that. So we went back, and then we got dropped off. We had a long extended line, probably about 30, 40 guys walking towards. There was a lot of RAR with us, black soldiers, and there was 4 of us on the left. We were the extreme. Now, next to me was a guy called Tom Crowley. He was a full bombardier. He was a British guy. He was actually killed in Croatia fighting for the Croatians in that little war. So there was the 4 of us and all these black soldiers, and then the rest of artillery. And they were actually, we could hear the shooting from Patu, or from the tours. So we did an extended line, started walking towards them. And, oh man, I heard this cracking noise all around me. And I said to old Tom, I said, what the hell's that? And he said, they're shooting at you. And that was, we'd been in the butts there, the ranges and everything. And when it's actually the first time you're actually being shot at physically by somebody who wants to kill you, it's sort of like, okay, this is now, games are over. So we actually started running towards these guys. And while we were running, this entire line on my right turned, but the guy next to me never said a word to us. So the 4 of us continued running towards this, where they were shooting. So we got there, and there was AK magazines, there was hats, everything just lying. So we picked it all up, and we realized that we were all on our own. We didn't know where anyone. We could hear shooting going on. And so old Tom said to us, look, we're no use to anybody now. So let's go back to where the trucks are. So as we were going back, a lynx went overhead and started circling. So we turned our caps inside out to show the day glow. And then he moved off. And we got back to our to the 4-5s, and we waited for the rest to come. I'll tell you one thing, when Ray Beamish saw me, he wanted to beat the shit out of me because I'd left them. And so Tom Crowley said, no, the black soldiers didn't tell us that they were sweeping to the right. We all thought we were carrying on. So we actually attacked a tour stronghold without realizing that we had no backup. But anyway, that was all those years ago when we weren't going to die. So the Patu guys, they probably had about 2 or 3 rounds each, and they thought they were dying. They thought that was their last time. So they were pretty grateful about it. So we went off, and we were dropping sticks off along the road. And there was AJ Arliss and his 3 guys. There's Ray with those 3 guys. And we stuck together. And AJ and Ray had already worked out, because we were given different frequencies. So if you wanted to talk, you could use certain frequencies instead of getting onto the normal where everybody. So they put onto, on the A76s, they put onto another frequency. So they were talking to each other. So while we were driving, there was a lot of dust on the road, and we passed 3 or 4 Majibas on bicycles. And the word came out, okay, debus. I was like, shit, what are you talking about? We're moving. So we all jumped, rolled, and we actually got out of sight, and we lay down, and the bicycles went past us. They didn't see us because of the dust. And the trucks went off, and we waited a bit. Those days, we didn't even think about anti-tracking or anything. We're gunners. What would we even think about? So AJ and Ray said, okay, AJ was going to walk across this mealie field. It's old. The stalks were standing, but it was quite a long flay. There was a ridge, probably about 120 meters, a bit further on, with trees and rocks inside it. So they ran across there, and we were going to follow them. So that we were covering them, and they were going to cover us. And as soon as AJ and them, because there was AJ and Paddy Power, they were in that crowd. And AJ radioed Ray and said, Ray, these tours, they are walking down from this village on the other side of this ridge. And where the ridge was another bigger flay. And they were coming down with a whole lot of black ladies, and all dressed in white. And they were all they were clapping and singing for them. So we ran across to join up. And I remember I was on the left point as the G gunner, and Bocky Orkamp, he was on the extreme right as the G gunner. So the 2 stick leaders were in the middle. Well, Paddy Power had a rifle grenade on his FN. There was Steve Luca, Mike Kuma, Mincioni. Trying to think who else was there. I think I've named them all. So we started, and we were watching them walk up towards us. And we were in the trees and the rocks. And they didn't see us. And that's the thing that I never forgot. They didn't see us. And as he walked down, Paddy initiated the contact by firing a rifle grenade in the tree right next to the guys. And then everybody opened up. I don't know, but it took me about a second later than the rest to open up. I couldn't pull that trigger. It was the weirdest, because I'd never shot at somebody in my life. So we all started shooting, and I think 3 or 4 of them went down immediately. They were gone. And then it carried on, and somebody threw a grenade at us. And I can't remember who shot. Somebody shot a grenade. So we all dived down. But it was so soft. But it was soft because our bloody ears were numb. And I remember one guy running to my right, and against all protocol, I shot across our guys. And I never forgot that scene from Platoon where that guy is running and he raises his arms. It was exactly like that. I had these spurts of dust going, and they went through him. And he put his arms up and he fell. And he got up and he ran again. And I shot him again and he fell. And I shouted, he's getting away. And then the other guys saw him and removed him. And we moved a bit further on. And then in the end, the last guy we found in the kraal at the end, I think he died. He was lying there. He hadn't died, sorry. He was groaning. And he was taken out of his misery. But while this was all happening, the nannies were, or the maids were crying. There was 4 or 5 of them. And I remember somebody saying, let's stop them. And our Ray said, there's no chance. That's it. We had to get, that other word.
Right.
And we had to get them and let them go. So they went, and we started picking up the weapons. But while this was all happening, AJ had 2 rounds stuck through his A76, so it wasn't good. His aerial broke off. And we'd clean forgotten that we were on a different frequency. So we were about 15 minutes after the contact that AJ reminded Ray, have you thought of telling people that we've had a contact? So we went back onto the right frequency, and you could hear the airwaves the people were showing, because it was a massive contact. And so Ray said, contact, 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 and then it was absolute silence. And he said, 8 Charlie Tangos taken out or killed in action. And he said, correction, 9. So we waited. So we got their weapons together. There was 9 bodies. There was a 1 PKM. They were all AKMs. There was no AKs, but there was 1 PKM. One of the guys had a Makarov, and he had a Red Star medal on him. So allegedly, we got a political commissar, the regional commander, sectional commander, and a lot of bakshees. So they all knew about obviously, but there was no, they asked us afterwards. I mean, we all went through, I remember getting a watch and all that, and I burnt my arm on my mag because it was so bloody hot. I was the only casualty, by the way. So we went, we basically looted. We found $24. That was it on all these bodies, because we were actually praying that we'd get a paymaster or something, and it wasn't to be. We found nothing to do with the Viscounts, absolute nothing. So when people say we got the guys, we didn't. These guys weren't even there, but they must have known about it. There was no alcohol or anything from the Viscount on these guys. But I found a little black goat, a little kid, small little thing, and it was still inside this one guy's shirt, and it was alive. It wasn't injured, wasn't wounded. So it was obviously going to be the food for later on. So I put it inside my shirt to just, for the time. And then we had these bodies all lying there with the weapons and all that. And then we waited for Special Branch to turn up. And I think they turned up about 8 o'clock that night. And they only took 4 bodies, but they took all the weapons. Oh, sorry, I lied. They didn't take all the weapons. They took 4 bodies, but they left the other bodies there. But while they were doing this, their headlights were on. So, I mean, we were totally compromised because of the ambush. But so they said, okay, we can't take anybody. We just got the 145. So the rest of you guys, you must stay here for the night and guard those bodies. To say I was shit scared is an understatement. We all were. So we went onto a little ridge, not the ridge that we'd initiated the contact, but more towards the east, I think it was. And so we were there. The bodies are lying in this field, so we could sort of watch them. But there was movement that night, and every time there was movement, one of the guys who was on guard would try and wake the rest of us, and we'd just say, "Look, just shoot." So that I think Mincy was the guy before me. And he said to me, there's movement. So I said, well, just shoot. And he did. And then it was my turn on guard. And I heard the same things. It was probably leaves or whatever it was. It doesn't matter. The fact is that we were absolutely petrified. So I heard this and I said, no. And I tried to wake up Mincy. He just told me stuff off. So I opened up with the MAG, whatever it was, and everybody, I just shut up, go back to sleep. Well, the next day, one of the bodies was gone. And there was another one. His head had been blown open, and the dogs had eaten his insides of his head. So they turned up, and the Special Branch turned up, picked the rest of us up with these 4 remaining bodies, and off we went to Karoi. And we were dropped off at the Karoi Country Club, and there was one huge party going on at the time. All the farmers, because they'd heard about these guys being culled or shot. And when we went in, we were still camoed up, everything. And the guy said, this is the ones who've just taken out those tours. Well, we got drunk, and to put it mildly. And we were given 9 crates of beer, not by the major, by the farmers of Karoi to thank us. And I remember it was quite a party. But it was, Anyway, we went back. The major, he wasn't impressed because I think they got 1 guy the whole time, the 1 RR, and we got 9, but 8 bodies because the 9th one gone. And then we were camping, or we were OPing near the pylons, the electrical pylons going to Kariba. And I wasn't on Ray and us, we were watching a compound, and we saw tours, and they were carrying a long pipe. And AJ and them went down there, and basically they ran. You know, we never saw them, and of course AJ and them never saw them either. But you know, so there was more than one Strela group, and we had an eclipse of the moon as well while we were patrolling, and it was actually quite good fun because it just got darker and darker, and none of us could understand it. And you know, when you're walking, and eventually you just cut full of everything, and we were pretending that a tree shadow would be a ditch, and we'd step carefully over it, and you watch the people behind you, and then you find a little strand of wire, and you wouldn't tell the guy behind. And I remember doing it to Steve Luca a few times and not telling him, and then I hear dong behind you. Yeah. And then Brian Ashby on another stick, he was playing with a tree trunk, and it started humming, and he hit it a bit harder, and it hummed even louder, and eventually it exploded. It was a beehive he was sitting on, and they went out both things. So he was running, and I remember the guys saying to us, "Oh well, they watched this guy, and it was like a caricature with an arrow of bees, and eventually Ash ran down towards them, and they all got stung." And I remember Gary Howard, he was seriously stung, and they had to casevac him, but not with choppers. Those choppers were used on an external, so they came and fetched him with vehicles. But that Urungi trip was something else. On the way back to Salisbury, the guys were putting smoke grenades on their truck to bugger up the civilian cars behind. And I remember there was a beer drink, and the one guy threw a white phos at them. The guys were a little bit bossies at the end of that trip. You know, the bus was a fiasco in itself. I think there was a poor one civilian killed. He was trying to run away, and he got shot at crossfire. I don't believe it was crossfire, but anyway. So yeah, that was our first Urungi, and that's why they called us back to the second one.
Right. And sort of in closing, we're getting close to the point of closing. One of the other sort of hotspots in the country, artillery-wise, was Villa Salazar. Did you ever see any action down there?
I never went.
Right.
We missed it by a couple of weeks. They were the last time the regular troop went there was probably February, March in 78. And that was when the guys on the way back, they got that Fire Force thing at Nyanyazi, just south of Mtali. But we never went to the territorials, basically the TFs went. Right. And I know that the guys went there, there was one commander, RLI, they were airlifted out, hot extraction, with artillery actually nailing the Freddies behind them. And here's the thing, that happened in late 77, early 78. And at the end of the war, 1980, we were invited to go to one commander to their mess to have a thank you braai. That would have been about March 1980, 3 years later.
Amazing. I think Neville spoke on that talk, didn't he? Where they were hitting the Freddies that were surrounding the RLI.
Yes.
Yeah. No, very interesting. Martin, it's been a really interesting talk. I've enjoyed it very much. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close?
Unfortunately, I would do it all again.
You would do it all again?
Of course.
Yeah.
It was something that we were part of history. We didn't realize at the time, we were young, but there were things, camaraderie. There's two guys, I'll even mention their names, Jola, or Coley Liebenberg, and Speedy, or Pat Smeeder. They were my best mates in the army, and they're both still alive, and they're both in Cape Town. Wish you guys well. I'll see you one day.
Yeah. And where are you living now?
I'm just outside Pretoria at Hardebeespoort Dam in a little. I live on a place called Bruderstorm Skeerport, that area. Right. It's actually quite pleasant. I live out on a farm.
And so quite nice. What are you doing with yourself to keep yourself going?
I'm an electrician. I have my own business.
Oh, excellent.
And I've been quite busy lately, and it's been a blessing.
No, I've been blessed. That's a lovely area, Hardebeespoort, going up to Sun City. I like that area. Martin, all I can do is say thank you for coming on board. It's great that you're one of the not so many that responds and has responded. And I want to encourage other people to please come forward It's just to chat and enhance our knowledge of our history. And these interviews make me realize that we are all one people still to this day. We've never really dissolved or separated, even though we're living all over the diaspora, we just still the same people. It's lovely when I've only got one guy in town here that's a roadie, and I'm going to meet him soon. But when you meet a roadie, the humor is there, the understanding is there. It's lovely, and I miss the camaraderie, like you're talking about as well. It's
well, we usually go to Edenvale the first Saturday of every month. I actually haven't been for a couple of months now. Go to Dickie Fritz, and the RLI have their prayer meeting there, and you meet up with them. It's quite good.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thanks. To everybody, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so, and smack the like button, because it helps the algorithms spread this type of talk further. Martin, thanks very much again, okay? And I wish you all the very best, my friend.
It's been a pleasure, Tony. Thank you for interviewing me.
And I hope you never have to eat a chongololo ever again.
I've learned my lesson. Thank you very much. You go well.
Take care, buddy. Bye.